Hello, Stewart's Chapel. Brother Don here, and Don Counts. This is Tuesday's devotion, and we are going to finish the book of Joel today. So, Joel chapter 3, verse 17 through 21. Now, there's one word that I will be pretty much camping out during this whole section, and it's found in our verse 17. It's the word know, K-N-O-W. To know. So you shall know. You got your Bibles, you need to underline, circle, highlight. In other words, make it stand out. You shall know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then Jerusalem shall be holy. No alien shall ever pass through her again. And it will come to pass in that day that the mountains shall drip with new wine. The hills shall flow with milk, and all the brooks of Judah shall be flooded with water. A fountain shall flow from the house of the Lord, and water the valley of Achaias. Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom a desolate wilderness, because of violence against the people of Judah. For they have shed innocent blood in their land. But Judah shall abide forever, and Jerusalem from generation to generation. For I will acquit them of the guilt of bloodshed, whom I had not acquitted. For the Lord, this is the way it ends, for the Lord dwells in Zion. Basically what it's saying, as far as the Jews, when they heard this, I'm sure there were some nationalistic Jews that saw him just sitting there in Jerusalem or Zion. But the message is, the way it ends, God's on the throne. That's been the message all the way through the book of Joel, is that God is sovereign. Sort of like when we looked at Jonah. God is sovereign. God gets the first word, and he will always get the last word. No matter what you think, God gets the last word. And God sits on the throne. He's the Lord. Incredible passage. Let me single out some words for you. I don't know what translation you have, but in the Hebrew, in verse 17, the word you is plural. In other words, he's not talking to you as if I was talking to Don Counts. He's talking to you. And who is that? Well, you would almost think that it was all of these nations and people, but no, he's talking to where he ended up in verse 16. His children, his people. His people shall know. This idea of God's people knowing that the Lord is God runs throughout the Old Testament and even into the New Testament, but especially in Ode. It was a strong theme for Ezekiel in the book of Ezekiel. Over and over again, he says, God will do this, and you will know, and you will know, and you will know. There are several things in here that they will know, but the main thing is they will know that he is their God. He is the God, he's sovereign, and he's holy. And he sits on the throne. In the midst of our lives, especially when you look at the book of Joel in its entirety and in the bigger picture, often in the midst of drought, disease, distress, in the midst of enemy and famine, we forget who sits on the throne. That's the way book of Joel began, right? But all the way through, Joel has one message. God is God. And you're not acting like his people. But when it's all said and done, his people will know God. Not in the kind of God that we have a tendency to create with a false love and a false holiness, but God in all of his righteousness and holiness and a perfect love, not like the world's love. You see, I don't get to define who God is. And no matter how complete I think my theology is, the truth is, I too will be one that will really come to a realization of who really God is. He will be the one sitting on the throne. I am afraid that much of my theology and understanding of God is very, very flawed still. I see through a glass dimly. But some, well, they don't even have glasses yet. Did you notice that it says, and no alien shall ever pass through her again? What that idea of that and that message is, there won't, because of the valley of decision and that incredible battle at this point here, in other words, it will only be God's people. Only God's people. And in His presence, there will be no drought. There will be no emptiness. Listen to the words. The mountains will drip. The hills will flow. The brooks of Judah will be flooded. The fountains shall flow. But all of God's people's enemies, there'll be nothing but desolation because of their violence against God's people. And when you show violence against God's people, you're showing violence against God. Let me leave a couple thoughts with you as we finish in Joel. This idea of knowing who God really is in all of His power as the judge, as the provider, as the God of wrath and holiness, but as the God who protects His children, a God who provides grace, but when grace isn't taken, He leads into damnation. This God is the one and only God. Any God that does not have those elements are incomplete. The book of Joel, revealed in a period of time and still reveals today, that in the midst of the worst and worst days, and in the midst of the best of best days, God is still on the throne. And there is nothing man or all nations against Him can change that. Love you, Steers Chapel.